Coming up on this episode of the Morning Star Podcast.
There's something more for you that's worth it. And I don't know your story and your limitations and those kind of things, but, and it's not easy. Again, it feels weird to say. It's the hardest thing I've done in my life. And that's so true, but yet there's been other hard things. So it will be, if you go down that journey, it will be the hardest thing. And it's so worth it.
That's good.
And you can do it with the Lord's help. And you don't have to stay where you are. And it will, again, everything's connected. I didn't understand the spiritual traces, like what it would do for me spiritually until I went through it. And it's just hard to put into words. So it's just like, it's almost like, just trust me, it's worth it.
Welcome to the Morning Star Podcast, where we engage in meaningful conversations that display God's handiwork and encourage you to live a Jesus-first life. This episode is all about getting to know one of our amazing ministry leaders. So listen in to learn more about your church family.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Morning Star Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Mayhew, and I have with me today a man you might recognize. This is Pastor John Jaskilka. John, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Good. It's a wonderful sunny day, and we're inside, unfortunately, but that's how it is. And we're here to just kind of talk about your life and how God has worked through your life. And I am really excited for this. I don't know if you know this or remember this, but you were the first person to greet me at Morning Star way like 3 years ago now. And you sat next to me and you're like, hey, I'm still new to Morning Star. I don't really recognize people. Like, how long have you been going here? And I'm like a week. And you're like, oh, let me go talk to all these people. And you introduced me to the people that eventually be my life group. And that's been a huge impact. And I've just seen your faithful ministry over the past 3 or so years that I've been here. And I've just been really blessed by your heart for Jesus, your heart for your family, your heart for other people. And I know a lot of the people that have blessed me have also been blessed by that and all the things that you do in men's discipleship. So I'm just really excited for this conversation, just to hear your heart and your story. But so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe start with, what do you do here? Just very casual, yeah.
Well, I'll start with saying it's an honor to be on the Morning Star Podcast. I finally made it in.
Yes.
And what a great ministry. And I'm so thankful for you and all the time you put into it. And I remember that Sunday when I met you. That was so fun. And sitting with you and just seeing how you plugged in and giving back to the church really blesses my heart. So yeah, they call me the executive pastor here, which no one really knows what that means. And some days I don't know what that means. But it's a great thing. It's a great place. So I do a little bit of everything. But my primary responsibilities is overseeing the staff, make sure staff is knowing what they're doing and going the right direction and helping them work through issues and that kind of stuff. So really being a cheerleader for the staff. Most of the hires, Pastor Scott definitely has final say on that, but I kind of run the operations of that. I think I've said it before from the stage. Candy Escalante, our financial director, she counts the money and I spend the money. So I definitely have some oversight there on how we set budgets and those kind of things. And I'm looking at finances. And then, my side hustle, I say, is I get to kind of lead the men's ministry here. And that's so fun. We have a Wednesday morning, early morning group of about 10 to 20 guys, depending on the season, where we look at scripture together. If I don't oversleep my alarm, I'm there. And it's so great. I love that. And then we seasonally do some like 6-week things on Thursday nights. So that's been really fun. But I'm not like the men's pastor. So it's very much kind of the something on the side. I want it to grow. I want it to be successful. I want it to reach people, but I have a lot of things that I kind of get to oversee. And then anytime Pastor Scott asks, I get to preach, which is well, once a month or so.
Yeah, fairly often.
Yeah, here and there. And I love that part of it as well. So always something different. No day is the same. Sometimes I can't keep up with it all. Sometimes it's less, but it's very robust and I love it.
Nice. And you've been doing that for 4
years this past June.
Okay. Nice.
And it feels very fast and very long all at the same time. So my family and I moved up June of 2019, and then the world shut down March of 2020. And that is a whole era of itself. And then there's been the post-pandemic season, whatever people are calling what we're in right now.
Yeah.
So there's kind of been 3 stages of our time in Salem. And it's been great.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's cool. I want to hear like kind of your backstory in general. Like, did you grow up in the church? Did you like believe in Jesus from the day you came out the womb? You like praise God, or like what was growing up for you like?
Yeah, really, really blessed. So my dad was a military family, so he moved every 3 years. My grandpa was a Marine. And so my dad got saved coming out of Vietnam. And then he became a pastor. So he's a first generational Christian and he jumped right in. A little more to the story than that, but that's the highlights. So grew up in a pastor's family, but my dad didn't grow up a Christian. So that was a really neat experience. And a lot of it as he and my mom were raising me. For my mom grew up in a Christian family, my dad did not. So it was definitely trying some things there. So grew up in the church, and it was kind of like, because of my dad's military background, church is what we did as a family. Because when you're a military family, like that's your life. That's what you do. That's your calling. And that definitely overflowed into our family in all the right ways. So we were always at church, and it was a small Baptist church, couple hundred people, classic. My mom ran children's ministry, played the piano, and vacuumed the church on the weekends, right? Like my mom did so many things. So we were always there. And for some reason, I always loved it. Like it's just what we did. And that's where my friends were. It was a safe place and I thrived there.
That's great. That's like the dream. That's what every church wants to be, right?
Yeah.
That's so cool to see you here as someone who's benefited from a church that was just living out for Jesus in a very healthy way.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. So one thing that I really appreciate in my story is my parents, and especially my dad, really never pushed anything on me with my faith. I mean, there's definitely certain things that we did and that were expected. At the same time, they were my decisions, including when I was going to follow Jesus, including when I was going to get baptized. So I remember I was 5 or 6 sitting in Sunday school, and the Sunday school teacher was going around, maybe 12 kids in the room, going around and like pointing at every kid. Have you accepted Jesus? Have you accepted Jesus? And every kid is like, no, like everyone's terrified. And the teacher got to me. Yeah. And I don't know exactly what this says about me, but the teacher's like, have you accepted Jesus? And I know I'm the pastor's kid. I know what the right answer is. And I was like, nope. And I knew I hadn't. And then the teacher said, do you want to? And I said, nope. And I am so glad, like, I'm just so glad, because I knew, I knew it was my choice. And then actually later that night, alone in my room by myself, I asked Jesus to come in my heart and trusted him with my life. And it was very meaningful. And looking back on it, I'm thankful that there was no pressure. I was alone. I was ready. I knew what I was doing even as a young child. And I didn't tell my parents for like 2 weeks. And then a couple weeks later, errands with my mom or whatever in the car, I was like, Mom, I'm a Christian. I accepted Jesus. And that's not always the case with pastors' kids. So I'm really thankful for that.
Really exciting. So like this was when you're 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Do you think you kind of like you stayed the walk throughout like high school, like all of that? Or do you think you kind of was one of those things where you accepted Jesus and then you kind of was like, oh, that was that, and then you forgot about it? Or
yeah, no, I knew what I was doing in a sense of what a 6, 7, 8-year-old could as I grew. But some of my friends and some of my peers now who grew up in the church would be like, every VBS, they're raising their hand to trust Jesus, right? And that wasn't me because I knew I had. So I was very secure in that.
That's good.
Definitely hard moments in my life. Definitely challenging times. Growing up, like middle school was awful, like it is for most middle school students, and deep insecurities and wanting to be popular and all those kind of things. But really at the same time, my faith was really solid all throughout middle school and high school. I would say I've had challenges, and I've thought through intellectually my faith, and I've thought through my faith emotionally, and I mean, trying to think through it every aspect. But I would say I've not ever had a faith crisis in that as well. Like I always come back to, I believe. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's great. I mean, no one wants a faith crisis, right? So that's awesome. And at some point you're like sitting there and probably decide that you want to become a pastor. Like, when did that happen for you?
Yeah. Who would want to do this? No, but it's amazing at the same time. I don't know if we talk about the good enough. It's the most beautiful thing, seeing God work in the lives of people and being a front row seat of that. So I had a really amazing youth pastor. One of the things that was so special about my dad is he was my dad first. And he told me a story. He retired from being a pastor in 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. Sorry, Dad, if I'm off on the date, if you're listening to this. He lives in Salem, comes to Morning Star.
Oh, nice.
You could get him on the show one of these days.
There we go.
But he was my dad after he retired. He told me a story of when he was a young pastor, he went to another pastor's retirement, and that pastor who was retiring got up in front of everyone and said, "Someone told me when I was young that if I took care of God's church, God would take care of my family. And I put way too much into the church, and I've lost my family." And my dad took a kind of an oath hearing that and said, "That will not be true of me and my family." And frankly, I don't know how he did it. Like he was a dad first, amazing father, not perfect, but just incredible.
That's good.
And he never seemed stressed on a Saturday night before he was going to preach the next day in a small church. So he's doing everything. He's preaching 50 Sundays a week. Like he's making the order of service. Yeah. Like he's
like, "Oh, we need a small group ministry."
Yeah, he's the IT guy, you know? So, but he was committed to being a dad first. And so anyway, all that to say, really glad about that. So I consider kind of my first pastor. Now my dad and mom helped shape me and form me spiritually, but my first pastor was my youth pastor. And again, small church, 2-pastor church. He invested a ton into me. And about maybe my like sophomore, junior year of high school, like I'm full in church thing. Like I'm running games for Awana. I'm teaching Sunday school for the 4th graders. And youth group was all student led. So I'm on the worship team playing bass guitar. Like I'm doing all these things. And it's just like, I just loved it. And so I think that's where I was just tasting and seeing how good it was to serve the Lord. And then my youth pastor took us to downtown Portland to a conference called SIMP, which stands for Students Equipped to Minister to Peers. And we got training in street evangelism and apologetics and all these cool things. Wow. And then we went into Portland to different areas as teams, and we talked to people about Jesus and the gospel. And it was a great week, challenging, scary, all those kind of things. And they would then have sessions at night. And the last night, the camp speaker, if we could call him that, was saying, and again, everyone there is committed, solid, on fire for Jesus type people. And he said, some of you here are called to be pastors and missionaries. And I knew he was talking about me.
Oh, wow.
And he asked for people to stand who felt called to full-time ministry. And so I stood up then on that night, probably 2001, and in the summer there, and that I knew I was a marked man for ministry, and I didn't know. I thought for a while I was going to be a missionary. And that was kind of my first calling, I would say, or first interest, but then it quickly shifted to being a youth pastor and youth ministry and those kind of things. So yeah, my senior year of high school, I knew what I wanted to do, and I had maybe a month in there when I was about ready to head to college. Is like, do I really want to do this? Maybe I should go into education and be a PE teacher, because they just play games all the time. That sounds fun, which I know PE teachers do way more than that. But then it was clearly, no, this is where I'm headed. So headed to Corbin, Western Baptist College at the time.
Okay.
And I knew whatever I did in ministry, you need the Bible. So I got a degree in biblical studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. There seems to be a certain blessing that the Lord gave you in just giving you that, it seems like you're very assured of your salvation, of your faith at a young age. And then when you were a pastor, you maybe had the normal vacillations, but it wasn't I'm not really sure. You're kind of settled on it.
Yeah.
And he did that through, he's like, I'm going to convict you at this conference or this camp thing. And I think that's just a certain, I don't know, it seems to be a certain blessing of the Lord. It's just and I think sometimes it's easy to overlook in our own lives, where it's just sometimes, it's nice to hone the Lord, oh, this is a really tough decision, and he helps us out.
Yeah.
But how much is he helping us in the non-tough decisions? We don't even see it sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just a beautiful thing that the Lord does. Yeah. You're at Western Bible College. Did I say that?
So it was Western Baptist.
Western
While
Baptist.
I was there, it changed the name to Corbin.
Okay.
Go Warriors. So yeah, I was there. Attended Morning Star.
Yeah.
Did the whole youth program thing. Was a high life leader, riot leader, interned, all that stuff.
Nice.
Time of my life.
Okay. Yeah. So, what sort of do you have any moments in your life, either in that time frame or before, that you were just this is just really clear to me that God was working in my life at this moment?
Oh, that's a really good question.
It's my job.
Yeah.
And we can circle back to that if you want more time to think about it. But
yeah, so time, I haven't thought of this in a really long time. There was a moment when, so I was in a freshman, sophomore year of high school, and that 6th grade through 10th grade were harder years for me. I really started to thrive my junior year of high school. But there was a moment freshman year where I was in a really, really tough spot, and I was walking home from school feeling all alone, feeling sorry for myself, feeling like I didn't have any friends. And God just really spoke to me of you're valued, and I want you to love people. And it was really clear, meaningful to me. Yeah. So that's something that stands out. I know there was others, but even I know he was with me even in the moments where I was really, really struggling. Yeah. And then it's so funny because when you're that age, you think you're the only one. And then you look back and it's everyone's having a hard time and those kind of things.
Yeah. And that could feel so lonely. But then when God speaks to you personally too, and it's not you've been to church, I'm sure you heard that message 100 times, but when God just, I don't know, it's different when it's not a husband and a wife. It's hey, let me text my, friend to tell my wife that I tell her I love her for her or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
There's just something about that intimacy of the personal connection, that I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
And he wants you to love people, and you end up going into the pastorate. So kind of you graduate Corbin, presumably.
Yeah, I did finish. Barely.
And then, where does your life take you from there?
Yeah. So it was really, man, I haven't talked about this in a long time. This is great memory lane for me and just how good God is. So I actually was considering coming on staff at Morning Star right out of college. And was going to do like a middle school role with the middle school pastor. And then there's a church in Eugene that was interested in me, and they wanted me to do children's ministry. And I wanted to be a youth pastor. So everything on paper was go to Morning Star. It's middle school, it's youth ministry.
You're already there.
Yes, exactly. And I love Morning Star. It was a great experience. And so I'm seriously dating a girl named Betsy at the time, who is now my wife. And this was actually her home church that was talking to me in Eugene.
Okay.
So she was excited about Eugene, and we would spend our summers in college serving at a place called Camp Harlow, which is really exciting because this week, Rob, our high school pastor, is speaking at Camp Harlow, and we have somewhere between 8 and 12 students that are counselors at Harlow this summer. And that's like my roots and place. So super special. And so I was interested because of the connection to Harlow. First Baptist Eugene owned Camp Harlow. My girlfriend, who I was pretty sure I was going to marry, she's from that church. And so, but then it was like, I didn't really want to do children's ministry. So it was a real wrestling, and through prayer and wise counsel, God led us to First Be Eugene. And so we headed down there. I started as like the preteen director, and it was big church. So
when you say big, like compared to Morning Star, because I grew up in a small town. My church was 20 people. So everyone's like, small church, 200 people.
Yeah. When I started, we were 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So
big church.
Those might be a little bit of evangelistic numbers in there, but give or take, somewhere between 1,400 and 2,000, depending on who's counting.
Okay.
So, so went there and then got married, and so my wife and I served at FBC Eugene for 12 years. So that was kind of the block there.
So like what you're at FBC doing children's ministry.
Yeah, that's where I started.
And then, so what sort of lessons are you learning in that time frame? Because you went through this decision, you're getting married, new town. It's unfortunately the Ducks town, but you like that. So,
well, that's where I grew. That's where I grew up.
Oh,
and went to high school. Was Eugene.
Got it. Yeah.
So not a new town.
Okay.
But yeah, it was so cool because I brought so much of my experience at Morning Star and High Life and Riot into First Be Eugene, and brought excitement to children's ministry. So some traditional things within the children's ministry, not that they're bad, but flannel graph and not that they're bad, but puppet, things that might not connect with emerging generation. So, and some of the kids might have said they were bored. And so I brought in crazy, goofy, whipped cream, slime, but still about the gospel, about Jesus, teaching the word of God to kids. Very important to me. So it was, I would like to say I brought youth group to kids, and they were ready for it, and it thrived, and it went really well, and learned so many things. I mean, it would be hours upon hours of discussion, all the things that Betsy and I learned there. But then it was so neat because then coming back to Morning Star, I was able to bring so much of what I learned from First Be back that I wouldn't have learned if I would have stayed at Morning Star. So kind of cool how that went full circle.
It's a good bit of cross-pollination, so to speak. Yeah. So were you children's pastor the whole time at First Be, or?
Oh no. Yeah. Lots of different roles and things changed every couple years, got a new assignment, so to speak. So, a simple explanation of it was first half was children's, second half was high school with oversight over birth through 18. And by the end, I was what was known as like the family executive pastor. So that's where I got a lot of the executive training and experiences. So I oversaw all the staff and operations from birth through 18.
Okay. Yeah. What would you say? Because you said there's a lot you learned. And of course, 12 years of working in a church. Like I could probably ramble on for like 4 hours on the things that I've thought about the past week. So like, but I think just what was one big like takeaway, either about God or one thing you learned, like from your time at First Baptist? Doesn't have to be the biggest one, no pressure there, but just one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to grasp just like one thing. So what I'm going to try to do here is just talk until
there you go.
Until it comes out. Yeah, what God was doing, I mean, looking back on it, I would say I learned, I don't know if I would have had the awareness to say it then, but like God is working through the highs and the lows. And like looking back, I'm embarrassed by things I did and said and how I treated people, but also proud of other things that I did and said and treated people, and seeing that God works through it all is maybe the biggest lesson there. Again, lots of lessons on how to run things and how to lead things. And yet learning that God needs to be in the middle of it all. And it's all about him. As I was talking, I thought of a really big lesson. I thought of it.
Yes.
So my senior pastor at the time at First B Eugene, he took some of us younger, whatever you call it, emerging leaders and invested in us. And I'm so thankful for his investment. And he would meet with us every other week on a Wednesday morning at like 6 a.m. and we'd go through things. And he started talking. He was like really the first person to talk to me about self-awareness. And that wasn't something that had really been on my radar or part of my vocabulary, and emotional intelligence and those kind of things. And so that began my journey there. I still am probably emotionally immature in some of those things and have so much room to grow in being aware and emotionally aware. But without those beginning conversations, I am frightened to think of how, where I'd be today if he hadn't have started that process then. Because it started for me 25, 26. And now a decade and a half later or so, man, if those conversations hadn't started then, I would not be in a good place. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah,
but
that
I'm
does.
really thankful for that.
For someone who's listening who isn't aware, what do you mean when you say self-awareness, emotional intelligence? Do you just want to give a brief?
Yeah, probably just knowing yourself and like knowing how others perceive you and just having, trying to look at yourself from how others would look at yourself and being aware of how you like come across and how you act and interact. So there's probably a much better clinical definition of self-awareness than that out there, but that's what I think of. Just knowing yourself well.
That's good. That's good. I'm reminded, I think it was I misattribute quotes all the time, but like John Calvin, I think, once said, God, grant that I might know myself more so that I may know you more. And I imagine it's probably similar for you, but when we're more aware of our own self, we can see, like how you said, like God was working in the highs and the lows. Like when we're aware of where our strengths and our weaknesses are, and when we're aware of how we come across and what we're doing and what's going on inside our hearts and our minds, we're so much more able to open ourselves to God more and let him meet our weaknesses, and let him use our strengths, but also just see the beauty of the fact that we serve a God who's so much more competent at everything than we do. Right. So at some point you're learning all these things. And then you decide to come to Morning Star. What's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've shared some of this publicly with, it's been in some of the sermons I've given. And when I first came, I shared it. So, it's been out there, but for those who haven't heard, so at this point in a good relationship with my wife, we still have a good relationship.
Congrats.
We have 2 kids and things are going really well. Like there's no reason to leave First B Eugene.
Yeah.
And, I love it. Love the church, love the people. And I have opportunity. It's not like I've hit a ceiling in the organization. I have more room to grow. There are steps for me to grow. People are talking to me about growth. And the ministries, people would say they're thriving. I would say they're thriving. Like reaching unbelievers, discipling who we have, like just really meaningful things. So those that know the story of Morning Star know, like this is 2018. So the people know what's happening with Morning Star and all the pain that the church is going through. And that affected us because we had stayed in contact with our connections at Morning Star and had stayed friends with people. So we're hearing about just the pain and the hard times the church was going through. And we were grieved by what was happening. And, so those that again know the story of Morning Star know that there was an article written by the Statesman's Journal that was really, really hurtful for our church and really hard. And, I was reading the article with all the emotions that so many people who are listening to this felt. And I'm not trying to be triggering to anyone or anything with this. And there's just this weird voice, I would describe it as. I know it wasn't a voice, but the best way to describe it is a voice, if that makes any sense at all. And it was, you can do that job. And and I was reading it in my office and I was like, whoa, that's weird. And then I didn't, and that's talking about the XP position that had been vacated through all of that. I was
the executive
I was like, you could do that job. I was like, oh, that's weird. And I just knew that I wasn't supposed to tell that to anyone. And I wasn't supposed to, I knew without a doubt I wasn't supposed to do anything with it and really almost forget about it. So I did. And I think I might have told Betsy about it or that sort of thing. So then fast forward a few months, our current high school pastor, Robert Beckley, he grew up in our church in Eugene. I've known him since he was a middle school, early high school student. He's just a treasure. And my wife and I were going to his wedding to Kaylee. And Betsy is a photographer, so she was shooting the wedding and all that kind of stuff. And so like Robert and I joke because I tell him he's lived my life. Like we went, like we literally grew up a mile from each other in Eugene.
Really?
Like, and he went to Churchill High School. I lived in Churchill area. He went to Camp Harlow. I went to Camp Harlow. He went to First B. I went to and so
that's funny.
No one knew more people at his wedding besides Rob and Kaylee than me, because there were First B people and Morning Star people and Camp Harlow people. And really that night, it was up in Portland, really that night, talked to a lot of Morning Star people who were the pain. This was August of 18, I believe. And the pain of everything was so fresh and it was so heartbreaking. And so then we're driving down back to Eugene from Portland, talking again about Morning Star. And as we're going by exit 252, the Kubler exit, like literally Betsy I remember it like yesterday. Betsy's like, what are they going to do? What's the church going to do? What's Morning Star going to do? And then she went, oh, they're going to call you. And I said, you're right.
Oh, man.
And so we at that moment were committed to, if they call, we would listen. It's not like we said, we're taking it. We just knew they were going to call and we would listen. And so Pastor Scott called me, September, a couple months later. So it wasn't the next day. And I didn't have his number. So he somehow got my number and he called and he left a message and I started listening to it and I just started laughing. I was like, oh my goodness. I believed it, but couldn't believe it. So then that, that started a process of lots of questions and it was good. It was comprehensive. And it was really hard for us to leave because on paper, there was no reason to leave. We were happy. We weren't looking to make it. This has already been kind of a long story. So to make it not quite as long, it was just really clear that we needed to come and we wanted to, we wanted to follow the Lord, but it was really hard leaving. And yet then now looking back on it, so thankful because we've grown so much being here in Salem and we've gotten a chance to become more like Christ because we're here. So
is this when you would say like, we did pre-plan a little talk of it. Is this when like the Acts passage kind of came to your mind as much?
No. So we were chatting pre-show notes or whatever you call that. Acts 20:24, that was more high school call to ministry. I consider my life worth nothing unless I share the gospel and do Paul's talking and carry that out. So that was more high school. So.
Well, it's still you continuing that vision that was laid out for you. Into a new frontier where you felt like maybe, from my understanding at least, you kind of felt like God was calling you there into this new frontier. And it's like, it's very Pauline where it's like, okay, well, planted here, things are going great here, but there's this city over there. And like Paul's day, it's like, they don't even know who Jesus is yet, right? And so similar, it's like you're going from just an ideal, comfortable situation to a new place where you can carry out the work of spreading the gospel into this new situation. So I think I'm glad you were faithful to that. So you end up getting hired by Morningstar, spoiler alert.
I'm here.
And that was 4 years ago, if I'm putting all the timelines together correctly. So what sort of things have you been like learning in the past 4 years, or how have you seen God move? It doesn't even need to be like related to Morningstar. It could be like, I was out mowing my lawn and learned a lot about, the farming metaphors of plants, or I don't know. But
we had another couple hours. God just taught us so much.
It's been a long 4 years for everyone in the world.
So I think the best way to describe it is, in Eugene, naively, I thought we had it kind of all put together and really comfortable and not really challenging yourself and just looking back on it, too comfortable. And then coming up to Salem, just learning that I had my trust in trust structures other than God, and that's sin. That's gross. It's disgusting. And again, we think of gross sin as like the big ones, murder and all those kind of things, but my sin is gross. And the good things that I was trusting more than God, comfort, in some senses, food, in some senses, family. Family's great. It's not greater than God. In some senses, laziness, like the list just goes on and on and on. And having those just kind of peeled back one by one through stepping in here and COVID and my own growth and other situations, just seeing God work in me. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful that I'm here. So I growing up, I always struggled with weight. I was made fun of as a middle schooler as being chunky, all the jokes. I would say big boned and husky and really insecure about my weight. Looking back on my life, it's not been diagnosed. I don't want to oversay something. I don't want to make something more dramatic than it is, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone who knew what they were talking about and looked at my eating habits in middle school and high school, it wouldn't surprise me if they would have said I had a eating disorder. Like, I don't know that for sure, but like, that was like my comfort. That was like really unhealthy stuff. And I was overweight too with that in there. So, it was a few years ago. And again, it's not one of it's socially acceptable, like, and people who have that weight struggle, like my heart, like it's so hard. Like, I would say I still have a weight struggle, even though I'm at a healthy weight today, it's still like a struggle. So, so much compassion and no judgment, like, because it's very real in my life. But a mentor, and God's been so good. I've always had great mentors in my life. A mentor basically, and I'm getting to like the main points of a very long conversation, but he basically loved me enough to say, John, you are obese. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm just overweight. I'm just husky. I'm just big boned. And I was ticked. It was so hurtful. I was so mad. I'm never talking to this guy again. He's like, you are obese. And I was like, no, I'm not. He's like, go get tested, body fat index stuff. If you're anything over 27% or whatever it is, you are obese. And so I went and got tested. It was 28.5. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am obese. And so I remember coming home from that test thing. And I was like, guess what, Betsy, you're married to an obese man. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And I'm not making light of it. It was just like, someone loved me enough to tell me that. And then someone loved me enough to do something about it. And this mentor started coaching me on how to be healthy and how to eat healthy and how to work out and exercise and those kind of things. And it's not, for me, it wasn't about like losing weight and looking better and feeling better about myself. It was like, it was a spiritual experience of like, one of the things that my mentor said to me in that conversation where he called me obese and fat and made me cry, basically. He said, how can you lead others spiritually when you're not leading yourself? Because it's all connected. And I didn't have good answers for that. And so that started a journey that then has unlocked so many other doors for me. Like, I remember when I started, some of you who are listening will laugh at this. Like, when I started losing weight, it was pretty noticeable, and I'm upfront a lot. And so people are like, you're losing so much weight. And it was so funny because people would assume it was easy. Oh, it just falls off of you. You're so lucky that you're easy. And this is the hardest thing I've done in my life in some aspects. Let's not like, and it's like, I just want to be like, no, this is not easy. This is, it's so much more than just exercising and food. This is like a trust structure. This is my identity. And so anyway, going through that process, learning to do hard things, learning to push yourself, learning to stick with things, tying that to my spiritual life, and just really realizing I was unaware that I was kind of feeling like I was a fraud, because I knew deep down I wasn't taking care of myself. And I want to protect that. I don't want that to be discovered.
Interesting.
And so just this, like, I can be like more like real and authentic, like, cause it's my private life has lots of flaws. My private life, is full of sin. So is my public life. God's grace is new every morning, and his forgiveness is more than enough.
Yeah, that's so good.
But but to have private victories where no one sees, that's like the greatest gift. That's the greatest gift. Like, who cares what you do in public if you're not winning in private? And that's more than just physical health. That's spiritual health. That's emotional health. That's like, and that conversation unlocked that I was having a lot of private failures, starting with my health. But again, nothing that the world would consider major, but now I look back and consider major, like how I treat my kids, how I treat Betsy, how I like all those kind of things. Those need to be in line privately. Now, my concern is by saying this is like, I don't have it together. Like, I feel like I'm a mess half the time, and like I fail every day. But it's got to start in private. And so that's been the biggest thing I've learned since coming to Morning Star, and that growth. I'm so thankful. And I look at the younger days, and I'm like, man, God is good. And it's all God. Like it is literally all him working in my life. And so I've been rambling a lot here. I just want to say this, like people who have that story of weight that's hard to talk about. And I just want you to know, like, it's hard.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to be any sort of condemnation to those people, if that makes sense. It's a struggle, and God, keep trusting God with that, and look to him for the strength. So I don't want to come across as it's
it's not
flippant. I don't want to be flippant. So,
It's not easy, but there's hope, and there's even spiritual growth and joy that can come out of persisting in those things that are very difficult. Right. No, I think that's beautiful. I see like a thread almost, like going back to your conversation you had at First B with your mentor, where he's talking to you about self-awareness, right? And then later on, your mentor kind of hits you over the head with a bag of self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
Like
different mentor, but
different mentor.
Yeah.
Okay. But like, there's just this thread where it's like, by the grace of God, he opened you up to like the idea already in advance, so that when you really like needed to do it even more, you were already like on that journey and on that walk to some degree. What would you say, like, let's say someone is struggling with weight, or maybe overweight or underweight potentially, very similar but different, obviously. What would you say, like, your biggest like spiritual advice to them would be, or like any sort of Bible passage that was really helpful for you, or like what would you say to them?
Yeah. And so I don't want to, again, come across that I have this mastered or anything.
Yeah.
But I want to say, it is worth the fight and the journey. And I had no idea what I was missing out on, just in my own personal freedom and my own, like, when we do our best, there's freedom, because we're doing our best. And that, I think it's First Peter. I don't remember the exact chapter or verse. I hadn't planned to share this verse, but I think basically it's talking about persecution. It's like, if you're doing your best, like, what can people do to you? Like, so anyway, all that to say, there's something more for you that's worth it. And I don't know your story and your limitations and those kind of things, but, and it's not easy. It feels weird to say. It's the hardest thing I've done in my life. And that's so true, but yet there's been other hard things. So it will be, if you go down that journey, it will be the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so worth it.
That's good.
And you can do it with the Lord's help. And you don't have to stay where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it will, again, everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand the spiritual traces, like what it would do for me spiritually until I went through it. And it's just hard to put into words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, it's almost like, just trust me, it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say if you work hard and change your lifestyle, you will not regret it.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, bringing it to today, 2023.
Yeah.
Like, where are you at with all, like, we guys kind of talked about that, but like with your life, you've gotten all the way up to this point, and there's been a lot of highs and lows, and over the past 4 years, especially 3 years with 2020 and the world just kind of doing what it did, exploding in spectacular fashion in many ways. Like what sort of thing has brought you maybe comfort or trust in God throughout that season?
So
just throughout like the past 4 years, because it's all been difficult and it kind of blurs together for me. I'm just thinking the other day, I'm like, I can't genuinely remember if this was 2020, 2021 or 2022.
Yeah.
But
so could you rephrase that again?
Yeah. What sort of things have brought you like trust and faith in God, or like helped you put your trust in God throughout those years? Like whether that's things you've seen God done in your life, or particular scripture or anything like that.
Yeah. So through the last couple of years, I've never, like in so many ways, like I'm a simple guy. Betsy makes fun of me because I never like have struggled. Like she's the one who told me most people really struggle what they want to do with their life. Most people have like a journey of job interviews, and that's not my story. And when I was younger, I was not very empathetic to people who had that struggle. A lot more empathetic now, and like, oh, it's tough, and those kind of things. So I never was like, I mean, there's bad days, but I was never like looking at the help wanted ads and seeing what else is out there. Because what else would I do? Like, this is it. And, so it's not one moment. It's just like, it's a continuation of seeing God faithful. I mean, again, there's definitely discouragement that I face, and down days and down seasons. But I would say what keeps it going is seeing God work in people's lives. Like the baptisms this last Sunday at Morning Star, like,
that was
so
cool.
amazing.
Yes.
And being at camp and seeing the 27 students get baptized, and being there when kids are cheering when they accept Jesus, those kind of things. So I think what keeps me going, if that's even a thing, is seeing the life change that God has for myself and other people.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it kind of seems to me like there's just so many like little threads in your story that just kind of had to line up in essence to bring you to where you are today. And like, it just reminds me of, I mean, we talked a bit about Romans 8:28 before this, of all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. I think I got that right?
Yeah.
And it seems to me like all these small conversations, all these small things are like, oh, this random connection with First Baptist and this random connection with the kid who was in middle school at First Baptist who ended up being, you go to this wedding and it's like, oh, this church I went to in college and all these things that just work together to, I think for your good. Would you say that? Yeah.
Yeah. So in high school, Romans 8:28 was the life verse. God works out all things for good for those who love him and have been called according to his purposes. A verse that can be taken out of context, but a verse that is also incredibly comforting and powerful. And key to understanding that is it's God works out everything for good. Is that my definition of good? Maybe, maybe not, but it's always going to be good, and it's always going to be for God's good and God's glory. And I would, through my life, that's absolutely true. And even in the darkest moments, God's good, and I believe it. So
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. Well, I think that's about the time we have. Thank you, John, so much for coming on, for sharing your story. Do you have any last closing thoughts before we wrap things up really quick?
Yeah, I'm excited for God to keep transforming us. I'm excited to see what God keeps doing in your life.
Me too.
In our church's life.
Me too.
Morning Star is a beautiful place with beautiful people who love Jesus. And I'm excited to see where God takes my family, how God, I'm excited what God does in my kids, through my kids, and being a dad and a husband. And my wife and my kids are my number one ministry. Everything else comes out of that. And I pray that my kids will grow up to love and obey Jesus, and that my wife and I will continue to grow and become even more of a team together. And I know God has amazing things, even if they don't fit our boxes of what amazing is. Yeah. And so I hope everyone, like myself, you, my family, our church family, I hope we all keep growing.
That's good. That's a good word. Real quick, where can people tend to find you are you generally here for first service, second service, both services?
I'm here. I work one day a week. No. Both services on a Sunday. If you tell me something on a Sunday, I'll probably forget because there's lots of things going. Yeah. If you tell me something that requires a logistic action step, I'll probably forget. Yes. Saying hi to you and your story and knowing you and talking to you, I will not forget. So, here on Sunday, and then typically in the office, Sunday through Monday through Thursday, but then we're always it's a calling. So we definitely want to take time off and have Sabbaths. So Friday and Saturday, family time, and using discernment of what to step into on the weekends, if that makes sense. Yeah. So,
and you're pretty frequently at the men's ministry stuff we talked about. With, Wednesday morning at
6:15.
Oh, it's even earlier than I thought. 6:15 at the church. When men's Bible study stuff happens, and Thursday evenings again, you pay attention to the service. It might not be Thursday evenings or whenever it happens. But thank you so much, John, for coming on and for sharing your story, and just for your love for our family and your love for God, and just there's been so much fruit that has come out of your, even just your 4 years here already. And thanks, I'm very excited to see more. And thank you so much, family, for listening. I hope that this conversation blessed you. I hoped that you were challenged and moved, and that you're as excited as we are to continue growing towards Christ and just learning more about him and how to be like him and how to love like him. So thank you so much, family, and have an absolutely blessed week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Morning Star Podcast. Join us again next time as we display God's handiwork and encourage you to live a Jesus-first life.